Hello, I'm Mike Nettleship and this is part 5 of a 6-part video about how I made this guitar. If you haven't already watched the previous parts, why not subscribe and take a look at them before you watch this. I hope you enjoy it, and if you do at the end, please give me the thumbs up. Thank you. The slots for the frets now, and I've tried one or two methods and found that this is the best one. First of all, I tried just putting this into the vise and trying to hand cut it like so, and realised that I couldn't get it very straight. So then I thought I'll cut it on the scroll saw, which I did try, but that wasn't very good because you haven't really got much control where the blade goes. And so it was back to the drawing board, and I came up with this idea, which seems to be working fine. And what I've done is, as you can see, I can just close in on that. I've got a piece of metal. I put it bang up to the line, well, so that the blade will slide down it. Clamped it to the neck, and I'm cutting the fret slot out using the blade, that piece of metal as a guide, and it's doing the job quite well. And I'm using just a small blade, because small hacksaw, because the blade is just the right thickness for the slots, so that the fret wire just goes straight in. So I've done some already, and now I'm going to finish the rest. What I didn't mention was, in the last little clip, was how I'm getting the right depth. So what I did was I measured the piece on the, I'm not going to be able to get that to focus. Well, yes. Yes, no, no, yes. The piece on the fret wire, which goes into the wood, that's no good. And I've marked it, very high tech this, I've marked it with a black line on the blade of a Stanley knife. So I'm using that as the depth gauge. So as I'm cutting down, I'm then popping that into the slot to make sure I've got the right depth. Got a bit more at the back, far side. Fraction more. And that's it. Even all the way across. Now all the frets are cut, I'm going to turn my attention to the markers which go on the fretboards. And just to mark the positions, I've stuck a bit of masking tape in each position where they're going to go. And they're going to be little circles, because that's the easiest, I think. I don't start cutting shapes out, not at this stage, not with it being my first guitar. So I'm going to make them little circular plugs. And because there's some mahogany in the body, and this is going to be a light coloured fretboard, I thought I'd make the plugs out of mahogany. So I've got a chunk of mahogany here. I've already cut some out, but I'll just do one more to show you how it's done. What I'm using is a plug cutter. That's one of these devices here. If it'll focus on it. Cuts a nice hole. It's not this one though, because the one I'm using is already in the drill. So here we go, I'll cut another core. And there inside the plug cutter you see the core that it's cut out, and that'll be a bit hot. So I'll just show you one that I've already done, one I prepared earlier, so to speak. I've got a few of those, and I'm going to cut them down with a hacksaw so that they're just about 5mm thick. Then I'll polish them up and then drill the holes in the neck and plant them in. They can't go too deep, of course, because there's only a thin layer of wood on the face of the fretboard here, and the truss rod is down inside, so I've got to be sure that the plugs don't go down inside and touch the truss rod. I think I mentioned before that I was putting a piece of masking tape where each little plug has to go, so that I don't put them in the wrong spot. And if you put a bigger piece, that's best. I've actually replaced the ones I used before, because to find the centre of each piece you have to draw a couple of diagonals, and if you've got some masking tape there, it's a bit easier for two reasons. One, you can see the cross easier, and two, you don't have to sand the pencil mark off after you've drilled the hole. So here we've got the first one, and get the straight edge, put it across one diagonal, from there to there. Make sure the pencil's sharp. Draw a line approximately in the centre, and then when you put the mark the other way, you can just do a little mark, or however big you want, and you've got a nice clear cross in the centre. So now I'm going to do that to all of them, and then I'm going to drill the holes. Now, one thing worth mentioning is this. The holes want to be central, but especially when you get down to the bottom of the fretboard, where you've got the frets very close together, and that hole there is only just, or should I say the space is only just big enough for the frets, and then the hole in between. So that has to be quite accurate. Now, the problem with some drills is when you start to drill the hole, it wanders a little bit, especially if you've got, well, like this pillar drill I've got. It's not well, it's good, but not brilliant, and it just, because it's belt driven, there's a little bit of play in the drive shaft. It does wander about a little bit. So the best kind of drill to use is one like this. Now, there must be a name for these, but I'm not sure what it is. But if you notice, it's got a spike in the middle just there. Now that is just absolutely great, because you can put that point bang in the centre of your cross for the hole that you're going to drill, and you know that it's going to drill the hole right there. Just before I start through the drilling, there is something which I did forget to mention. In fact, I forgot to do it myself until I'd marked them all up already, and that is that at the 12th fret you've got to mark that with something slightly different, and usually it's, if you're using dots, is to put 2 dots there, which is what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to put the little plugs in, and you know that, oh, there's one gone. Right, here we go, try again. If you look at them, they've got, you can see that they've got grain, there's grain in it, because I've cut them from wood obviously. So I'm going to make sure that the grain is the same way on each one when I put it in. I think I'm going to have it going across the neck, because the grain of the neck goes up, so I'll have this going across. And before I put each one in, I'm going to put a blob of glue in. try not to get too much squirting out. Okay, grain the right way, pop it into position and just press it down. You can just tap it with a hammer just to make sure it's down, but use a piece, something in between, so that you don't, if you miss, you don't damage anything. Okay, we've got some glue squirting out there, but it doesn't matter. Now it's standing proud, and that's the intention, so that I can go down later and just cut them level with a sharp chisel and then sand them so that they're flush. There we are, that's looking not too bad at all. Now I'm drilling the holes for the machine heads or winders or whatever you want to call them. I've already done 3 and I just did those a little bit by guesswork. I've got, here we are, sat one on the top, put it roughly where I thought it might be, bearing in mind where the hole is and where the edge of the top is, and then marked the other 2. And then I used my little measuring gauge, which I prefer to use rather than a tape measure, more accurate, doesn't slide about. And I made sure that they were equidistant apart and equidistant from the edge. So now I've got to do the other side. I put masking tape on so that I can put marks on there without actually putting it on the wood. It just protects it a little bit. Notice I'm using a drill with a point on, like I did to put the markers on the fretboard, so that as soon as it touches it'll bite and it won't slide about, because I need it to be in exactly the right place. And for the first hole I'm just going to pack it up to sit that on, because this piece of the neck here is resting on the drill bed and it's raising it up, so I don't really want to be doing it like that and getting it at a strange angle. Got to try and keep it at 90 degrees. So here we go with the first hole. Now I've got to the stage where I'm thinking about fitting the neck to the body. I've glued 2 parts of the body together, I haven't done the other bit yet. And I've cut this hole out for the neck to slot into. Now, if you were to buy a kit guitar, or indeed take a neck off of a guitar that you've bought, you'll find that it is beautifully routed out in there and the neck fits absolutely perfectly into it. A lovely tight fit. But this isn't going to happen when you're making one for yourself. And that's exactly what's happened with this one. I've had to drill it out, chop it so that the neck fits. Now, one thing I knew would happen was that there was no way I could cut that hole out exactly the right size for the neck to fit in. So, to get round that little problem, what I've done is I've routed around the bottom of the neck just a little bit, leaving a lip on the top, so that the lip sits onto the top of there and overhangs the cutout, so that you can't see that my cutout isn't perfect as it would be in one that you bought. Now this has created its own problem, and you have to be a bit good at improvising when you're doing things for yourself, because this is what I found out. I bought a back plate to put on. Okay, the back plate is pre-drilled. It's designed for a fender, and when I fit that into there, I actually find that the screws which go through there to hold the neck in are not in the right place. Well, they're in the right place, but my guitar's not going to fit it, because where I've cut it out around the edges, you'll see that the holes there are too far down, or in other words, where I've cut it out is where the screws should be. So that's a problem. That caused me a problem, and I thought, well, when I fit this on the back, I really want that to be inset a little bit, because I want to round that edge at the back of the guitar. So I pondered for a while and thought, oh my god, stuck here. Then I suddenly thought to myself, right, how to get around that? Okay, what I do is, I don't use those screws to screw the neck in actually. I just use that as a cover, and I've drilled 4 more holes here, and I'm going to screw the neck in through those holes with 12 by 1.5 inch screws, so that the neck is held in by those, and then I'm going to put the plate on top so that it looks as if that actually holds the neck in. So that got around that little problem, and I've started to do that, so I'll carry on with that now. Now here's a tricky bit. We're looking at the underneath of the guitar now, the back, and you can see those screws there, which are the screws which are going to go through and hold the neck. But there's one thing that I've got to get really precise, and that is the lining up of the neck itself in conjunction with the body. Otherwise everything is a waste of time. So this is what I've done. This is a pretty crude way of doing it, but it's the easiest way that I can do it without, I don't know, some kind of technical equipment. What I've done is this. I put a screw in the neck just where the nut's going to go, so the screw hole won't be seen later. I put some masking tape on and I marked the centre. I've wrapped some wire around that screw, and I put another screw where the centre of the bridge is going to be. And now what I've got is some wire, piece of wire, and if I hold it in the centre of that screw, pull it tightly, then I can look down it and see if it lines up with the rest of the neck. And as you can see, that is pretty close. That piece of wire goes down the centre of the most centre markings. That one's a fraction out. That one's central, that one's central, that one's central, and right down to the centre of the bridge. So that is perfectly lined up. So now all I've got to do, is lift this up, turn it over, and screw the screws through into the neck and hold it in position. But actually, like I said before, I can't actually screw the screw straight into the neck because it's solid beech, so I've got to screw them just a little way in to mark where they're going to be, take it to pieces, drill some leader holes into the neck, and then put it back together, and then it should screw in perfectly in position. So fingers crossed. There it is. I flipped it over, screwed it up, marked it, took it out, drilled a small hole in each mark to just make it easy for the screws to go in, a little bit smaller than the hole I drilled through this piece for these screws to go in. I would just say that when I drill the holes for these screws to go through, I didn't drill the holes big enough for the screws to slot straight through. I drilled them a little bit smaller, so I had to screw these through this part, and then screw them also into the neck part. So the whole thing is tightly screwed together, and I checked it when I'd done it and with the wire, and it's just great. As good as I could possibly expect to get it. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button right here so you can watch my other videos.